Hi guys, it's Ashley Pederson with the Ashley Pederson Team at RE/MAX, and I'm very excited because I'm interviewing my big brother, Chris Gates, today. He is a commercial realtor at Kolb Properties here in town, and we have a interesting topic we're going to talk about. He knows a lot about the medical marijuana industry since it was legalized in 2018, late 2018. He's been working with a lot of companies that's going to start opening up dispensaries and locations here in mid-Missouri. And I just wanted to, I'm not very knowledgeable about the subject, and he is, and I wanted to have him on the show to help answer some questions. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel like kind of a big deal now that I'm on your Facebook show. So.
There you go. Well, so tell us, medical marijuana became legal in Missouri late 2018.
Yep.
And tell us a little bit. First of all, one thing that confuses me is the definitions or understanding what's a dispensary,
Sure.
what's cultivation, manufacturing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, and really my process with it, or how I got started in Ashley, is being in commercial real estate. I had companies reach out to me, like you mentioned. This was voted in November of 2018, and like other Missouri residents or citizens, I wasn't very familiar with it. I personally didn't vote for it, but that's neither here nor there. 65% of Missouri residents did vote for it, which so I was definitely in the minority there. But once this was legalized, I knew that they were going to be finding locations, and they reached out to our organization, Kolb Properties, and talked to myself and a couple of the other agents there, and said, different outfits that wanted to find locations. So with that process, at that point I was very green in it, and no pun intended, but I was very new to it all and started learning a lot about the medical marijuana industry there, kind of through the process of finding locations for them. But going back to your question, dispensaries, there were lots of different licenses awarded. Really, there were dispensaries. Do you want me to just go through and kind of talk about everything?
So they had to get licenses.
Yeah, so there's
what most anybody can.
Right, most people are familiar with Missouri Department of Health and Human Services was the organization that approved licenses. So these groups would go and they would find a location, whether it be for a dispensary, which is a retail location where the people actually get the medical marijuana that the public has the most interaction with. Then there's cultivation sites where the product's grown. There's manufacturing sites where it's converted into a product that is actually consumed. So that, because this is not marijuana, they're not selling joints. They're not selling bags of marijuana grass or whatever it is that you would expect. It's going to be used in an oil form that is dispensed through a vape pen.
Okay.
And eventually, my understanding is that those are going to be, most medical marijuana is going to be dispensed in the form of consumables. Very similar, frankly, to, I guess, my understanding is recreational marijuana in other states. So consumables or edibles, I should say, not consumables. And then there's also testing labs. So they have to test the product to quantify the amount of THC in the product and make sure that everything is, it's very absolute as far as the amounts in it. And then there's also transportation licenses that were given out to transfer the product from one facility to the next, maybe from the cultivation to the manufacturing, from the manufacturing to the dispensaries.
So most of these companies that got licenses, are they going to have licenses in each one of these categories, or would it be just one company has a dispensary license, the other one a cultivation? Or
Yep. So that's a great question. It's kind of all over the board. Obviously, if you're cultivating the marijuana, you cannot do a testing lab, because that would be a conflict of interest if you're testing your own product. But there are many companies that would do dispensaries and are also doing cultivation, or they're maybe doing cultivation and manufacturing together, because those kind of go hand in hand, because that you go from the first step of the cultivation to the second step of converting it to the product.
And are they mostly Missouri companies, or are these companies that maybe started in other states where it's already legal, and then they're coming to Missouri to start these companies?
Well, it's a mix of both, as far as kind of the core of the company throughout the state, or throughout the applications. However, every application, my understanding is every application has to have a Missouri resident in it. So for example, if there's a group that does this in multiple states throughout the union, but they are now applying in Missouri, they're going to partner with a person here that is a Missouri resident and form an LLC in order to put their application in. So my understanding is everyone that put applications in, there had to be at least some Missouri resident on the application. But really the kind of maybe the financial backing, kind of the horsepower behind it all, the knowledge to some degree, a lot of the knowledge for a lot of these would be out of state. Now that being said too, there's companies, there were LLCs that were put together for this that were just simply Missouri based as well.
Gotcha.
So.
And so you have written on our paper the number of licenses for each category. Maybe go through that really fast. Yeah,
so with dispensaries, I think there were over 1,000 that applied, if I'm not mistaken. And you can fact check me on anything here. I don't claim to be perfect on all these numbers, but I think pretty much right on. There were 192 dispensaries that were approved. There's 8 congressional districts in the state of Missouri, so there were 24 per congressional district. That's how they approved it. There's cultivation, there were 60, so there's 60 growth facilities, 86 manufacturing, 10 testing labs, and then transportation, there's 24.
Okay.
So
wonderful. Now, so all of these licenses are already given out?
They've all been given out.
Okay.
Here locally, what you'll see is, if I can just talk about kind of, there's 2 locations for dispensaries here in Jefferson City. They're both on the 1400 block of Missouri Boulevard. One of them next door to McDonald's. I think it's Cottonstone Gallery, or I'm sorry, Hawthorne Gallery, I think is the location there. And then also right across the street from that at Plaza Mall, there will be, interestingly with this, with the dispensaries, there were 192. This is just one person's or one group's opinion, but I worked with a company that felt like they've seen throughout the country where many states approve too many dispensaries, and they really felt like what a healthy number was, as far as the supply and demand and what was necessary in order for these companies to make money, is that they felt like one dispensary per 100,000 population, which in the state of Missouri we have 6.2 million people approximately, so you're talking about 62 licenses. We have 192 licenses. So again, that's just one group's opinion, but that'll be interesting to see if there's too many where you see. I think there's a lot of money to be made in this industry from what I've gathered. A lot of these groups are very financially strong. However, that being said, I think you'll see some of the weaker groups maybe not make it for very long either.
Gotcha. When you were searching for locations for the dispensaries, were there rules against like how close could they be to schools?
Sure.
Or?
So the state of Missouri put it out where there was 1,000 feet for daycares, churches, and schools. You had to have 1,000-foot setback. Now that 1,000-foot was based on a walking path. So for example, as the crow flies, if you were only 600 feet, but by the time you'd walk out the door, walk down the sidewalk, make the turn down the other sidewalk, you were at 1,000 feet. That's how they would base that. Municipalities did have some latitude as far as how they would change that. They could reduce that number and that sort of thing. But for lion's share of communities, we're doing 1,000, and that made it tough. Finding when you start looking to see, there might be a little church somewhere that you didn't expect or what have you. So it was very hard to find locations.
Okay.
So
now cultivation, do you know of where those are going to be? locations?
There was, if I'm not mistaken, there wasn't any in Cole County that were approved. There were 2 sites that were put in. Neither one of them won the cultivation. One company that I worked with did receive an award for the manufacturing, but I don't know where they're going to end up at. But they did win an award for the manufacturing, and then we worked with some companies here in Central Missouri for the cultivation. I mean, for the dispensaries as well.
Okay. Well, and let's talk, I know earlier you had mentioned to me about, it's a little tricky getting the funding, the lending, getting the closing done on these locations, and just explain why it was trickier than your average deal.
Yeah, so it's interesting, with the federal government and the FDIC obviously is a wing of the federal government, and with financing, they do not see recreational marijuana, or in our case, medical marijuana, as legal. That's illegal in the eyes of the federal government still. So lenders, banking institutions, local banks did not want to lend on a property if someone wanted to buy this property and lease it to a medical marijuana facility. They didn't want to do that because they were afraid that the FDIC could come down on them. Realistically, probably wouldn't happen, and they understood that, but that possibility is out there. Also, title companies didn't want to be involved with it. They didn't want to have, they couldn't do that provide title insurance, or just didn't even want to handle the closing. We did find one title company here in Central Missouri who would do that, and then there were some lenders that kind of took that risk. They all understand, speaking with some of the bankers, it sounds like, Ashley, that they're going to have, you'll see it change in the next 6 months to a year. They feel like that the federal government will kind of ease up on some of that, or change the laws where the banks have more latitude to lend on that sort of thing. So, well, but it was interesting because they didn't want to. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. So this whole process has been really kind of like the Wild West. I mean, there was, you couldn't have, the other thing on the leasing, let's say someone already owned the property, but they had a loan with it. We had to find landlords if they wanted to lease to a manufacturing or dispensary or whatever it is that have no loan on it, because their lender would. So it's not just deals being sold, but also leases that are in place. So when you start looking at properties, big commercial properties that are paid for, a lot of them have loans. So again, between that and the setbacks and that sort of thing, it was very tough to find locations for these companies. So.
Well, and back to the part about it not being legal, in the federal's eyes there, I have talked to agents out of Colorado who have, worked on these commercial deals in Colorado.
On the recreational.
Yes, and it was interesting because one of the agents I talked to said, security is such a big thing for them because those companies cannot put the money that they're making in a bank. Yep. So they have, tons of cash at the store. One of the agents told me that one of the buildings that he sold, actually, they installed a false wall. So you think you're at the end of the building, but actually there's a whole nother room back there that's just, all their cash. So they're paying employees in cash. And I'm sure, the processes and systems of owning your own business is hard enough, but then put it in there that, okay, now we got to pay everybody in cash. We got to keep our own cash. I can't imagine what that's like.
Yeah, so. It's high time that the federal government, gets on the same page with the states, because so many of the states have either legalized medical marijuana, or they've legalized both medical marijuana and recreational.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it'll be good when that happens, because it's definitely, I've heard the same thing, like in Colorado, one banker was telling me that they were having a lot of buildings being purchased with vaults, like old savings and loans, and anyone that had a big vault, because they put all their cash in the vaults.
In that. Yeah. So back to, the security thing. So do you anticipate there being a ton of security at these locations?
I'm sure there will be. Honestly, it's not something I really it's a good question, but I don't know the answer to, so I don't want to pretend to exactly.
Yeah.
But I know that there's security as far as with the transportation. Like a lot of these facilities have, with the dispensaries, they have where the truck moves the product from the manufacturing to the dispensary. There has to be a gated area there and everything. But as far as like armed guards and that sort of thing, these will feel very soft. And, when you go into this will have a very clean medical type feel. The pictures that I saw of a lot of these retail locations, frankly, they almost look like an Apple store. They're very white and clean and modern and and that sort of thing. So they'll probably have their security measures in place, I'm sure, but it's not gonna feel that way. To the public.
Cool. Well, I know you have some interesting facts too. You wanted to
just a couple things that I was reading about actually these last few days, is that there's I did not know this until a couple weeks ago. They actually approved with this law 9,500 patients in the state of Missouri are approved for home growing of plants for their own personal use. So 9,500 people can
do it at
home.
Can
grow their own weed at home.
Okay.
And have up to 12 plants, 6 that flower and 6 that non-flower. So that's a little detail that I think most of the public doesn't know. The other part is that just as of a couple weeks ago, 31,000 patients have already been approved in the state of Missouri 31,000 patients have applied for medical marijuana cards in the state of Missouri, of which about 29,500 of them had been approved.
Okay.
So, the lion's share of these folks have already been approved for this, and about every week there's another 1,000 applicants. And I had lunch with a client the other day, and we were talking about this medical marijuana and stuff, and I was telling him a little bit of the things I'm sharing today to him, and he reaches into his wallet and he pulls out his medical marijuana
card. Yeah.
He had already been approved, so he was
Wow.
one of the 29,000 that we're speaking of. So
Okay. When will these stores open?
you'll see them open probably about summertime. So it's sometime June. I think June, July, August. I think is when you're going to start seeing them sprout up around town.
And do you think recreational marijuana will be legal soon in Missouri?
I think the groups that I worked with really felt like that's the next wave. That's the process that's come about in other states naturally before us. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Illinois just approved that for recreational use. I did read that in the November, some groups are pushing to have a November 2020 ballot to have recreational on the ballot, November 2020. I don't know if that's going to happen, or if that's fact, or if that's going to happen or not. But potentially could. But I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see it on the ballot, and I think you'll see within my hunch is the next 2 to 5 years, recreational marijuana will be legalized. And that's why they wanted really retail locations. You don't get your medicine always at a retail location. I guess you do it at a Walgreens or what have you, but these groups really wanted to have high traffic retail locations because they felt like the next wave of this was going to be the recreational.
Yeah, that's a good point. Why isn't it just, at a pharmacy?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, is there anything else you think that we need to know, that the kind of the inside scoop on any of this?
I think we've covered a lot of it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been it'll be interesting. I'm glad to getting back to brokering regular real estate transactions. They're a little bit easier.
Okay, cool.
So.
Well,
thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming. And if you guys need a commercial real estate agent in Jefferson City, he's the best. And I'm not just saying that. He really is. He's smart, knows his stuff. Make sure that you make a good decision on the right investment. And that's so important with commercial real estate. So give Chris a call at Kolb Properties. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ash.
All right.